They say you can prove anything with stats. Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how to use your Spotify podcasting stats to see how well your podcast is actually performing. So in addition to using the stats that you get from your podcast host, Spotify offers some additional statistics, things that will help you better understand your audience and what is working and not working for your listeners. So let me jump into an example podcast to show you how to get there and then also walk through all of those stats. So if we start at the overview page for the Buzzsprout Advanced Podcast Statistics for this podcast and scroll down to the bottom, then you can click directly to your Spotify stats by clicking this button right here. And this will take you directly to podcasters.spotify.com. So this is the screen that you're going to land on. So if you haven't yet claimed your podcast in Spotify, but it is in there, then you'll want to click this button that says Get Started. And you'll need a couple things like your RSS feed and a couple other details to claim that. But if you've already claimed your podcast, then you would simply go up here to the top right corner and click Log In. And then this is what the overview page looks like in your Spotify statistics. And I want to draw your attention to a couple key data points that you're probably not used to seeing in your podcast host statistics. The first one is this starts number. So that represents the number of times someone has listened to at least 0 seconds of your podcast. So even if they're just scrolling through, randomly clicking episodes, each one of those clicks will count as a start. Streams is going to be much closer to your download numbers that you would get from your podcast host. But a stream is simply that somebody listened to at least 60 seconds of your podcast episode. And so you want these numbers, your starts and your streams, to be as close together as possible. Because what that means is that not only are people clicking on episodes, but they're actually continuing to listen to them. And so you see here how important the first minute is to hook in your audience, to give them a reason to stick around, and make them curious to see what's going to happen in the rest of the episode. And if you want to get down into an episode by episode breakdown of how close those numbers are, simply go down here to your episodes. So we're going to change this filter to the last 90 days. And then we can see starts in this column and streams in this column. So for instance, this one, 9747, about half of people that started this podcast listened past a minute. Same thing with here. It's about half. This one is closer. This one, so 7956. And you just want to measure, you want to keep track of this, right? So if you want to see which episodes are performing better than others, you want to see which episodes are these number closest. So 22 and 16 is relatively close. So what is it about this episode in particular that made people want to keep listening? Log that nugget and then apply those lessons moving forward to future episodes to make your podcast better. The other two numbers that you'll see up here are listeners and followers. Now, listeners simply refers to the number of unique Spotify users that have ever started an episode of your podcast. So if somebody is browsing through podcasts on their phone and they land on yours and click to play an episode, they count as a listener. A follower is someone who has clicked the follow button on your podcast. So that's very similar to how YouTube measures subscribers, if you're familiar with that. So that just means that somebody said, hey, I'm interested in this podcast, keep me up to date. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually listening to your podcast. Same thing with listeners. Listeners is actually kind of a deceiving number. So while it's nice to see that, yeah, people are listening to your show, neither one of these numbers are very helpful for you in the long run. A much more important metric to track are the download numbers that you're seeing in your podcast host. That's going to be much more indicative of how many people are listening to your podcast consistently. But one thing that Spotify can offer you that your podcast host won't be able to is demographics data. And so if you click on the audience tab, they give you a gender and age breakdown. So why is this important? So we can see that for this podcast, around 40% of people that listen to this show are female and around 60% are male. So if you're trying to better understand your listener, if you're trying to get a better sense of who your podcast appeals to, who's listening to it consistently, then you can better understand how to make episodes for those people in the future. Same thing with age, right? So you can see from this podcast that around 37% of people that listen to this show are between 18 and 22. So this is a pretty popular show for college-aged people, right? And then you can also see the breakdowns at different age ranges as well. So this information can help you better understand who your listener is. And when you pair that with the content of your show and what you know about the kinds of people that would be interested in the things you discuss, you can start to put together a pretty clear picture of who your listener is. And the more clear you can be on who's listening to your podcast, the better able you're going to be to make content that appeals to them. And that's the secret sauce of having a successful podcast, is making content that people want to listen to. And so that's what these statistics help you to figure out. You can also go up to the details tab and double check to make sure that your RSS feed is correct, that your hosting provider is correct. If you want a link to your show in Spotify, this is where you can copy it. So let's say that you have a website and you want to put a button that says listen to this podcast on Spotify. Spotify gives you those badges. So you just download whichever one you want to use, upload it to your website, and then use this link. So whenever anyone clicks on that image, it will take them directly to your podcast in Spotify. Pretty cool, right? So that's a nice little tool that you get here inside your dashboard. So those are the kinds of things you can learn from your Spotify stats. You can see what kinds of people are listening to you, specifically demographics data. And you can also see which episodes are keeping people engaged, where they're listening past the first 60 seconds and continuing to listen to the full episode. And those two things, combined with the stats you get from your podcast host, will give you a more complete picture so you can make confident decisions about how to make your podcast better moving forward. But you probably won't be logging into your Spotify dashboard on a daily basis. Every once in a while is good enough, because if you take the ice cream that is your podcast host statistics and then add the cherry on top, which is Spotify, those two things complement each other very well. And then I want to encourage you to check out the other videos that we've made about podcast statistics, whether it's the Buzzsprout Advanced Podcast Statistics and walking through all the things you get access to with that, the Apple Podcast Analytics video, or the Stitcher Stats video. Each of those are going to help you get a better sense of what is available to you as a podcaster so you can make better decisions about your podcast moving forward. But I hope this video was helpful for you. And until next time, keep podcasting.